Hey guys, Dan Heilman back with another video. Today we're going to be talking about the Death Cross pump, which has completed, and I'm thinking we might see some sort of a retest. So we're going to go through that. I'm also working on a couple other things I haven't posted the last couple of days. I've been trying to update my website. So yeah, I had a website that I did mostly video game stuff. My other channel is a video game channel. And I'm going to add some investing stuff in here. You know, I'm not a web designer, so it doesn't really look that great. It's just kind of some useful tools. It's mostly video game stuff, as I mentioned. But we're going to add a bunch of stuff for investing on here. Some tools, just some tips, some tricks, some rules. I am still in my Bitcoin short. I did short a couple others. I shorted ENS. That one went okay, a small profit. And I also shorted SUI. That one was quite good. I think I shorted pretty much the exact top and closed it at about a 30% gain because I was using 2x leverage. So yeah, that's what's going on. But let's talk about Bitcoin now and the Death Cross, which we just completed. So we have this thing called a Death Cross. And basically what it is you have the 50 and 200 day simple moving average. I think maybe I'll publish this indicator. It's just kind of a nice little indicator. It only works on the daily time frame for the Death Cross specifically, but obviously it's different for other time frames because it's based on the time frame, right? So it's 50 if you're on the 1 hour, it's 50 hours, and 200 hours if you're on the daily, it's this and that. So it's just very simple. It's nothing crazy complicated. I also have the Camel Finex indicator telling me that we have a cycle low coming in the next about week. So that's kind of interesting because it kind of correlates with this Death Cross retest, I'll call it. So yeah, so normally what happens is you have a Death Cross. So that is when this blue line goes under this red line, and in anticipation of the Death Cross, usually we get a sell-off. So you can see the kind of the 2 weeks before it came down and these crossed, you can see a 15% sell-off. And then when we hit the Death Cross, it was basically the low. There was maybe 2 more days where it just went slightly lower and a 31% pump. You know what's very interesting is the last time we did this, it was also the low. You can see a sell-off of much higher, 30%, but I think this was also the yen carry trade, which is interesting. So this was kind of a little bit of a black swan, I'll call it, compared to a normal Death Cross. But what's kind of interesting is if you look at the pump, it's the same, 32%. So what could we see now? We could see another dump of, I don't know, let's say 18%. Where would that put us? 11% would tag the blue simple moving average. So that would be kind of what I expect. I would think that minimum we'll see a 7% dump. I'm going to keep my short open. That would be about 90 to 50. So that's interesting. And I think that also correlates, if I'm not mistaken, with what is that? No, that was, okay, let me go a little bit deeper here. So if we go a little bit deeper down to here, something like that. What is that? 91, 158. I don't know why it keeps doing that. I don't know what keeps doing that. But there's a 91, 158. That's kind of important for if you look at the top to the bottom. Oops, let's lock that so we don't keep doing that. So if you look at the fib retracement tool and you do that down to this kind of low here, I guess let's try to the actual low here. So if we unlock that, let's go all the way down to the bear market low right about there. We'll hit lock, and then what do we got going on here? So yeah, there we go. We got an 89, 180. So there's a couple different important fib levels. You can also go from this one right here, the top, to this one right here. And what does that give you? You have about a 92,000 is the 0.5 fib, which is a very important fib retracement level as well. So we could see somewhere there. We could also see there's kind of some other fib levels down in here, 89, 87, 84-ish is another one. So the 0.236 right there, the 84. So we could hit any of those levels on this retest. We could also just retest this moving average. So, and we also could just obviously do none of that, and we could get some news on Monday that would just massively pump the market, and all of the TA would go out the window. And that's kind of what happens when you're looking at investing. You really it's just a probability of what's going to happen, right? So you have a high probability of retesting this, because if I look in the past, every time we had this pump, we came back down and we at least retested these. Now let's go look at some other ones. So here's another death cross. Again, just a big pump. And honestly, this one never came back to retest it. So interesting. Here is, so what are we looking for? Blue to go below the red, right? So if we go up back in here, blue goes below the red, you can see it dumped all the way down here. We went back up and we kind of retested it, but broke it down. And then, you know, this was kind of in the bear market. So I don't know that that's really a valid one. Let's go back and look at like 2019 death cross. So what do we got here? So here we go, blue going below the red. We came back up and we kind of just got stopped out at the red. Let's see if these percentages make any sense. That's a 50% pump, yahoo. Here's another one, blue to the red. You can see kind of dump in anticipation. And then as soon as it happened, that was the low. And then boom, a massive pump, 40%. And then a dump to a lower high, lower low, sorry. So it's not super reliable. The thing that is actually the most reliable is the actual pump, but that's behind us, so that's not super useful for anyone now. It would have been useful to review this before, but you can see there's usually a sell-off before the death cross. It's got this name death cross, but technically it's a bullish indicator, right? Because almost always when you see this, especially in a bull market, sorry. In a bear market, it's a little bit different. You know, this is still a bull market. So as you can see here, blue goes behind here and it was very bullish, right? I mean, this was a 30% pump, right? We came back down. We did not make a lower low. And I still don't think we're going to make a lower low. And the reason I think that is also because this Camel Finance indicator is does a pretty good job of picking lows. And it said that this is the low. This was a lower low, but it's kind of meaning when it picks this one and doesn't change it to here, that kind of means that this was like a deviation and not really something that's normal. It's kind of interesting. These cycle, this is basically a cycle indicator. So it just basically uses these time frames and picks the low for a time frame, and usually that means that, you know, when the low's in, you're going to get some uptrend for a while. It's almost like we live in a simulation, to be honest, because it's like, why do all these cycles have certain a number of day periods? I don't know. The whole thing's kind of just weird to me. The more and more I go through my life, I feel like we maybe just live in a simulation and none of this is even real. It's just really funny when you see it, all this stuff and how the fib retracement works and how even nature respects these Fibonacci sequences. It's just, the whole thing's kind of funny, but I don't want to get on a tangent about that. But anyways, my expectation here is I'll keep this short open. I have $105,000 short right now open on Bitcoin, and I'm just using 2x leverage because is the funding positive now? The funding is positive now. So that means that most people are long. Again, usually it goes against the grain, right? It's usually a contrary. And if almost everyone's long, usually that means we're going to dump for a little bit. But I kind of have a feeling that we will see Monday and Tuesday down. We have some other data coming from the Fed. And another thing that's interesting is price really leads, and then people will find a narrative to kind of assign to the price of why that thing happened. So we have some ISM, manufacturing PMI, and then this is going to be the interesting. On the 7th, we have the Fed interest rate decision, press conference, etc. So if we put that on here, when is the 7th? That is coming up really quickly. So this will be an interesting thing to see what happens here. Let's make this nice and red here. This will be very interesting to see what happens this day. And it's in this window. So this green window here is the predicted cycle low. So that means we could have a low here and we could have a low all the way to the 16th. So it's kind of a big window. And the way that this indicator works is it predicts it, and then you'll see this D printed, but sometimes it'll fail like this one. And then it'll say, oh, never mind. It's actually here. It wasn't there. And then it also predicts when the next big weekly cycle low is. Wow, that's a huge. And then look at this is saying the bear market low is going to be over here. How do you like that? So this is 2026. And I mean, obviously this is a huge, massive window, but it's interesting. So it's saying that the bear market is going to happen in 2026. And that correlates with you know, all the other predictions for cycles, right? So if you look at this, you know, I've been saying that we should see a cycle top somewhere around October of this year, and then we should start the bear market, and then the low should be October of 2026, roughly. And if you go back and look at just the cycles, you can see that this has been pretty accurate. I mean, obviously, past performance is not always an indicator of future performance, but usually it rhymes. And you can see these cycles have very similar days, right? 526, 518, 511. So it's very similar, right? You know, 549, 540, we'll see. We're guessing is going to be the top somewhere in here. And the bear markets are usually, you know, 360, 375. Maybe this one will be 380. Who knows? So I'm thinking we're going to have a top somewhere in here, a bottom somewhere in here. Well, this is the halving, this red one right here. These are all based on the halvings and the presidential cycles and the money cycles. So the thing that has changed a little bit here is, especially when it comes to like alt season and stuff like that, here's another way to look at it is the logarithmic chart. You can see something like this. And you know, we could see a price. This could be anywhere, right? This could be anywhere from 175 to 218. It just depends on how fast this rolls over. So we'll see what happens. Again, these are all the cycle times here. Again, we'll see what happens here. But another kind of interesting thing is we're coming to the top of this wedge here. So we have this increasing wedge, which usually is bearish, right? So usually when this wedge completes, another thing, it's on 517, which kind of correlates with the low of Bitcoin. So maybe this next pump, we'll see a big pump with altcoins. We could see this start to just blast down here because we're also coming up to the top here. Maybe 66% is the top. So we could just come right out of here. Maybe we'll see one final pump out of here and then a big dump. And that usually starts altcoin season. We need the Fed to start quantitative easing because that's usually what also will start altcoin season. We've been in Bitcoin season for quite some time, basically since 2022, August of 2022. So interesting. We'll see what happens here. But going back to the price of Bitcoin and the completion of this cross, this death cross, I think we will come down to at least test some of these moving averages. I'm going to leave my short open. My stop loss is just above 100K. And yeah, I'm going to leave it there. And we're just going to kind of watch it. I think I have my take profit at 84,000. So I'm not expecting us to go much lower. We could also complete an inverse head and shoulders. So another thing we could do is we could make a low here. This is a lower low, and then we could just make another low down here somewhere. We could hit all the way to 78,000 or so. So I might move my take profit down a little bit lower and then just manually close a percent of my position. Maybe I'll take half my profit at, I do have like 20% of my profit to be taken at 92. Just in case we go back up. And then I think maybe I'll change this to like maybe 10% of my position. Then maybe at 88, I'll take another 20% of my position. And then maybe at 84, I'll take another maybe like 50% of my position. And then I'll leave like the last 20% or so in case we get some really big dump. It usually takes some time, but I mean, like, look at this dump right here. If we do this, what was this dump right here? I mean, this was only a couple days. And was this the tariff day? Maybe this was tariff day, but there's a 16% dump in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 candles. So 5 days. So that kind of is within this window. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's well within this window, 5 days. I don't think we're going to see, I mean, we could see a 20% dump, but I feel like something catastrophic would have to happen. But maybe that happens. Maybe we get some really bad data. Maybe this Fed interest rate decision does not go well. Maybe we don't get a cut. Maybe something god awful, like, I don't know, he raises interest rates, or maybe he just doesn't sound like there's any chance for rates anytime soon. We could see a lot happen here. It makes, I'm happy I'm in a short right now. I shorted pretty much the top. I mean, honestly, I opened it at 97,200. So it's pretty good open. Basically what made me want to, I guess you can check out the video if you want to, but basically what made me want to short it was, you know, we were seeing higher highs over here. And if you look at the RSI down here, it's making lower lows, right? So it's going down, or lower highs, I should say, right? So that's called a bearish divergence. And then look at the volume. we had all this volume on the pump, and then look at the volume. It's like nothing now. So the volume kept going down and down and down. Even on this big pump, the volume was way down here. And then we had another pattern play out, just to kind of re-talk about what I already talked about in that last video. We had this other pattern, which is this like kind of expanding, broadening wedge where you kind of do something like this. This is also a bearish sign, and usually what you see is, I think I already even have it on my chart. If I show it up, yeah, you can see what I was kind of planning on playing out. I almost made it to the top. What usually happens is we'll get down here, maybe we'll get a little pump, and then we'll get a dump. And again, we could dump to any of these levels. So I don't know. We'll kind of see what happens. I am short-term bearish, but long-term very bullish. So I still think that the top is not in. I think we're going to continue to see a new all-time high. As I said, my base case is about 200,000 for October-ish of this year. Now, the only thing that would really derail that is if we end up in some very big recession. That would definitely derail my target, and maybe then we would see something, unfortunately, like the 2021 top, where we just get a higher sweep and then a dump. That would suck. But the thing that kind of is way different is this first initial dump was 54%, right? And this dump right here was only a 31% dump. 31% dump is very normal for bull markets. A 50% dump is not normal for a bull market, right? If you go to even 2000, 19, 2017, once you got a 50% dump, it was over and you're done, right? So if we did see a massive 50% dump, I would think we're probably done, and I would maybe close some of my positions. Honestly, altcoins never really made it back up. So at this point, there's kind of no point in really even closing those positions. And then I'll talk about one last thing before we close here is Litecoin will have ETFs. It has to be approved tomorrow, or delayed tomorrow. And I don't know that they've ever delayed. Tomorrow is the final deadline for one of them, and then the other one is the 13th. So we might get a Litecoin ETF. Usually the news will make a pump, and then usually it'll be, I don't know, a week before they open. And that's been hit or miss, right? So if you look at the Bitcoin ETF, it pumped. Did it pump when it opened? The Ethereum one definitely did not pump when it opened. So if I go look at, if I go over here, let's go to MSTR. Why did that pull out of there? I did not mean to do that. If we go to FETH, I opened, this is the first week. So let's see. I think I opened right around here. Maybe it was here. My price was about 29 bucks is when I opened it. So you can see it dumped pretty hard when it first opened. I mean, look at this. That's a 40% dump right out of the gate. Right now, this is my cost basis, 29 bucks, which feels bad. Actually, it's not that bad anymore. I don't think it's that bad. I think I'm only down 30%. So I think I've purchased some more a little bit lower. But yeah, so here's ETH. Obviously, ETH is kind of a different ball game because it's been bleeding quite hard for quite some time. I don't know. I'm thinking the difference between ETH and Litecoin is that Litecoin has a fixed supply. That's why I'm so bullish on Litecoin. It's very similar to Bitcoin. It has very similar algorithms. You mine it. ETH kind of went from proof of work to proof of stake, and it's kind of just been bleeding since then. So there's kind of some big differences between Ethereum and Litecoin. I think Litecoin is going to be very bullish. I mean, you got 84 million, and the price is quite small on Litecoin. So I mean, you can only buy so much of it, right? We're back above this big line, which is nice. We need to get back into this channel up here. And this could be the catalyst, right? If ETFs get approved and people start purchasing a lot of Litecoin, I mean, there's only 84 million of them. There's 21 million Bitcoin. There's 84 million Litecoin. So I am really, really betting on Litecoin getting some massive pumps. And look at the volume die down. So the volume's down. We've been going down. It's almost kind of producing it is producing inverse head and shoulders here. So, here's a low, there's a lower low, here is a higher low. So it's kind of, and then the volume also is on the head, which validates the inverse head and shoulders. So interesting. I'm really bullish on both Bitcoin and Litecoin. And I think if we see a big pump after this big dump we got coming, and especially if the Fed starts quantitative easing, I think we'll finally see our altcoin season. You can see my trade watches, some other things I'm looking to trade. I will long a lot of these. DOT is another one I'm very bullish on. Matic is just so beaten down that I feel like we could see some ridiculous pumps out of Matic. So we'll see what happens here. Interesting, it's saying the cycle low here. I might open a Matic trade pretty soon. Daily, what do we got? Yeah, it says the weekly low is in at 15 cents. That would have been a good entry. You can see again, almost a nice dot. Oh, I'm on this thing. I don't want to be on that. All right, see. Okay. Anyways, yeah, that's gonna be pretty much it for the video. If you do want to trade, I love Bitunix. If you want to short, if you want to long, you can feel free to use my link below. It gives you a nice discount on fees permanently, and there's some nice newcomer bonuses. So feel free to check that out. I'm gonna leave the short in open as it is right now. I haven't taken any profits yet. You can see it's kind of curling over a little bit. We're almost seeing a little bit of a inverse head and shoulders, but I think tomorrow we're going to continue to dump when we open. So I'm going to leave it open for a while. And my stop loss is pretty high. It's way up, way up here. So my stop loss is way up there. If I get stopped out, I get stopped out. So that's it. Have a great day. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like, hit the subscribe. Ended up being a long video, but kind of wanted to just give my thoughts on a couple different things. So hope you guys enjoyed it, and that's it for the video. Again, use my link. It's the best way to support the channel, and just be careful if you're leverage trading. If you do want to watch, if you watch only one video, watch my risk management video that I have on the channel, so you don't lose too much money while you're leverage trading, and use low leverage and a small % of your account. That's it. Have a great day, everyone. See you guys.